Assalamu alaikum. Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah. Today we're going to speak about a special person. 1400 years ago, a man appeared in the world who changed the course of human history. There's a lot of motivational speakers, a lot of TED Talks, there's a lot of people who say, this person changed the world, that person changed the world. However, when it comes to the Prophet, peace be upon him, he truly changed the world in a way that we can actually measure. It's not just an abstract thing of, oh, you know, he had an impact, or people loved him, or, you know, he had a following of, I don't know, 1 million people on Instagram. No. He truly changed the world in a way that nobody in history has done so. And the question we want to ask today is, was he true? Because there's one thing, was he influential? And we can say, yes, he was very influential. But there's quite another claim when you say, he was speaking the truth. So today what I want to cover is, not only is this man special, but also that he has come to the world with a message which was true. How many of you here would love to have your own private island in which you have a boat, you have your own house, you have Wi-Fi, you have no need to work for the rest of your life, and a private jet that lands on this island and you are supplied with everything that you desire? How many people would like something like that? Raise your hands. Okay, some people are smiling. Good. I want to show this as an example for why the question of the Prophet's life is important. Because if I go on and I just speak to you straight away about why the Prophet, peace be upon him, was so influential, and was he actually speaking the truth, there is another question which may be nagging in the back of your head, which is, hang on a second, why is this relevant? Why is any of this relevant? Fine, something may be true, but how does it impact me? Well, supposing you actually had access to this island, you had access to a great amount of wealth, you were very famous, and you were enjoying your life, and you're sitting there on the beach. On that beach, as you're sitting there, someone, if they were to take a picture of you, or if you were to take a picture of yourself at the island, would they say you are a happy person or a sad person? That's a question, by the way. Happy person or a sad person? Happy person, right? You'd be very happy. However, what if I was to say that there was a tumor that was growing inside your skull, and that tumor was pressing against some very important parts of your brain, which was causing you a significant amount of pain? And regardless of all of the luxury that's around you, knowing that you have a cancerous tumor, and one day you are no longer going to be alive, it will take out any pleasure you have from all of those things around you, regardless of how much you have. So, we in this life, regardless of whatever we actually have, we have to recognize that this life is only for a limited period, and then we will eventually pass away. And that will help us to understand why this man is important, and why we need to recognize in this very short life whether he was speaking the truth. A friend of mine, Imran Hussain, who some of you may have seen online, not Sheikh Imran Hussain, but Imran Hussain, he gave me an example a few years ago which really stuck with me. So me and him, we used to live in this place in London called Southall, right? Southall is a very depressing place. I can't explain why it's depressing. You have to go there and experience it to see why it's depressing. But anyway, Imran was somebody who he wasn't really aware of the true message of the Prophet, peace be upon him. He was somebody that was away from Islam completely. He was like an agnostic. And what he said is, when I was walking past the butcher shops in Southwold there's a lot of butcher shops, he said, when I looked at the dead piece of meat that was hanging, I looked at the meat and I thought about myself and I said, we're just both the same thing. What is the difference between this and that piece of meat? And truly, from a worldview of materialism, from a worldview of where you only have matter, where there is no soul, that is the logical conclusion. That's why the message of the Prophet, peace be upon him, is so important, because fundamentally it's a message of hope. It's a message of hope. And it's a message which says, this short life, regardless of whether you live a life full of wealth or whether you live a life full of misery and difficulty, fundamentally both people, whether they're rich or whether they're poor, regardless of their social status, they recognize the finitude of life and they recognize that one day they're going to pass away. And that nihilistic understanding of life is better to arrive at that when you're young than when you're old, because then you'll have more time to search for the truth. And the message of the Prophet, peace be upon him, is a message of hope, which says, no, you are not just a piece of meat. You are something more than that. You are a human being which has been created by Allah for a higher purpose, for a higher goal. You have a soul, and that soul is fed through a relationship with God. And you, in this short life, regardless of how difficult your life is, and everybody goes through struggles, right? Don't ever think, and we live in a time of social media, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, all this nonsense, right? You keep seeing pictures of people and they look very happy. But question yourself, are they really? Because everybody in life, you're going to go through financial difficulties, you're going to go through health problems, you're going to go through personal relationship problems, you're going to go through a multitude of issues, a myriad of issues which are unavoidable until you actually pass away. So the message of the Prophet, peace be upon him, is a message of hope. It's a message of hope that there is something beyond this life. Now, the impact of the life of the Prophet upon this earth is something which is unprecedented. Is something which is hard to deny. The most militant deniers of God, they cannot deny the impact that the life of the Prophet had upon this earth. And we can look at the earth from a space perspective, a bird's eye view. And we can look at the many different subjects, many different topics, right, which human beings categorize in terms of their knowledge. And when you look at that taxonomy, you look at, science, geography, mathematics, history, sociology, you find out this man actually had a huge impact on each one of these fields. So firstly, the impact on science. I was having a discussion once with somebody a non-Muslim, and he thought it was absurd, the claim that I was making. And the claim that I made is, your science that you have today, regardless of whatever scientific achievements exist in the world, these have to be traced back to the origin of science. And they have to be traced back to an origin which would not be possible without the Quran. So he was very surprised and shocked at this. But I gave him the history. I said to him, look, we start off with the world today, right? The modern world, in which we have science, in which we have, quantum mechanics, general relativity, and all the other good stuff. And this goes back to the Enlightenment period. And then we can go back to the period of the Renaissance. And the Renaissance didn't just come out of nowhere. The Renaissance was directly instigated by Islamic Spain, by the Muslim world. We have historical evidence for this. So if there was no Renaissance, if there was no Islamic Spain, there would be no Renaissance. And so where did the knowledge of the Spaniards, the Islamic Spaniards, come from? And where did all of that science come from? Well, it came from the Muslim thirst for knowledge. The thirst to understand why the world works the way it actually works. When I was young, I was taught science was actually started off by white European men in Western Europe when the whole world was in darkness in the some 15th, 16th century. But as I got older, I started to realize actually that was nonsense, right? That was the Eurocentric whitewashing of history. It was actually people from the Middle East, Muslims, who instigated the scientific method itself. Now, I'm just going to give you a quick history here. Science has been around for a long time. However, there's a distinction we can make between the science that the Greeks did and the science that the Muslims did. So, the Greek science was a type of proto-science. It was largely based on theorization, right? And reconfirming their theories. Hassan ibn Haytham, 1,000 years ago, he came up with what we now call the modern inductive scientific method. And that modern inductive scientific method, that is what we use till today. So why did he come up with this scientific method? Why did he do science? Well, according to his own thoughts, according to his own motives, he says that to get closer to my Lord, am I doing science? I'm doing science to get closer to my Lord. So there was a religious, spiritual imperative which made him go towards doing science. It wasn't just for some utility. Now, Hassan ibn Haytham, when he formalized the scientific method, and you can get more details about this in a book called The Eternal Challenge, the actual steps of the method and the way that he put it together is very close to the scientific method that we use today. Peer review, falsification, using observations to test hypotheses, and so on. So, if the Prophet didn't exist, peace be upon him, Hassan ibn Haytham wouldn't have existed, Renaissance wouldn't have happened, nor would you have the Industrial Revolution, and nor would you have the modern world the way we have it right now. Now, this is very surprising that this argument isn't really used, and one of the reasons it's not really used is because there is a Eurocentric whitewashing of history, right? Which is actually something which, alhamdulillah, is being recognized now by even Western academics, right? Patricia Farah, she is an academic on the history of science, a non-Muslim, but she has also spoken about how European whitewashing has been happening on the history of science, and she speaks greatly about why the Muslims were so good at science, and she speaks about the inherent nature of Islam fostering education. So that's from the scientific perspective. The impact of the life of the Prophet, peace be upon him, on politics, on world politics. Not only in the 7th century, but in the 21st century. Islam is something which started off in the desert, which you can consider the ashtray of the world, right? Sandwiched between the Persian Empire and the Roman Empire. When the Prophet started his message, you have to understand Medina was not an important trading center in the world. It was just a little city. And the center of power, the two superpowers in the world, are the Persians and the Romans. Yet, in a very short time, the whole political order of the world was reversed. These people, they came out of the desert, and the example given by one historian is like Eskimos. You know Eskimos that you get who live in ice huts? It's like Eskimos today taking over the United States and taking over Russia, right? The two superpowers, right? That is the equivalent, this historian said, is what the Sahaba did in terms of the Roman Empire and the Persian Empire. that they managed to change a world political order. Now, after this happened, we had the different dynasties. We had the Umayyads, we had the Abbasids, we had the Mongols, we had the Ottomans, we had the North African sort of states. We had all this massive political change that this one man managed to create. The impact of the life of the Prophet, peace be upon him, on economics. Now, this is a very strange one, because you will find today academics at the most prestigious universities in the world, regardless of whether they're Western academics or they are Muslims, they still recognize Islam and the Islamic economic system as an alternative system which was once implemented in the world. Now, how could a man in the desert, where you just have camels and goats and barely any water, come up with a sophisticated economic system which was actually applied, which is distinct from other economic systems? And we're not just speaking about broad ideas. For example, that the Islamic economic system is based upon spending rather than saving, right? We're speaking about even small issues to do with monopolies, to do with price fixing, to do with fairness. And again, the impact of the life of the Prophet, peace be upon him, on economics is another area which is very much again reinforces the idea that my favorite area, morality. The impact of the life of the Prophet, peace be upon him, on morality. Now, the idea that some things are good, some things are bad, we ought to do some things, we ought not to do other things, right? And you have all different types of ethical theories in the world, right? You have, Kantian ethics, virtue ethics, utilitarian sort of ethics. You have all these different systems, yet the Prophet, peace be upon him, he managed to create a massive social change in terms of morality in a very short period of time. People that were downtrodden, right? People that were right at the bottom of society, orphans and widows. He managed to create a worldview, not create a worldview, to propose a change in society through his teachings, which had a massive change on the way that we see other human beings. To this day, you find in Muslim communities a large number of Muslims that are involved in giving charity. Just recently on Facebook I saw that there was a celebration in Ireland. A celebration in Ireland which was to do with when the Irish were going through a famine and the British were not helping them, that the Ottomans, they actually sent them aid, right? And to this day, where the Ottomans, gave them the relief, that local football team still has the Ottoman insignia. So the impact of the life of the Prophet, peace be upon him, on moral issues, on ethical issues, is something, again, which shows his impact. Now, when we look at geography, when we look at culture, this is a very interesting area. And Islam has managed to go into places with very distinct cultures and has managed to become the bedrock of that society. You will find a large number of people in the world today who identify as Muslims before they identify as being part of a certain ethnic group or a certain nation group or a certain political order. And this impact that the Prophet had on geography, on culture, is something which you notice a lot more actually in places like Pakistan, where you start to realize that certain cultural norms have become intertwined with Islam, right? So again, the impact of the Prophet, peace be upon him, on geography, on culture, is something which is very interesting. Okay, the impact of the Prophet, peace be upon him, on psychology. Now this is, again, an area that's very close to heart. And the reason for that is in a time of social media like we have now, prophetic teachings They help you psychologically deal with the realities of the 21st century. So for example, one of the causes of easy access to social media is that everybody can get a smartphone. Now, students here at LUMS, which is a prestigious university in Pakistan, you come from a certain social background. It's very unlikely that you have lived a life in which you have lived on less than 2 meals a day, right? It's very unlikely that you've gone 6 months without eating meat. God forbid, can't say that to the Lahoris. But you've lived a life that's actually quite prestigious, according to the majority of Pakistanis. Yet, if you look at the smartphone, a person who's selling corn, a person who is selling balloons, a person who's living on literally maybe $20, $30 a month, trying to run his family on that, people like this have access to phones, right? Literally, people like this have access to phones. So that is something which we should really take note of. That what does that do in a society? Now, $20, $30 I think is a bit too less. 5,000 rupees, something like this, right? I was recently in a taxi, and the taxi driver, I think he had 2 or 3 kids, his salary in his job was 15,000 rupees. How the heck do you survive with 15,000 rupees? However, people like him, they do exist. And when you are on social media, you will see people putting up pictures of, oh, I went to this restaurant, I went to that restaurant, I had Korean food, I had this, I had that. Those poor people, they're getting a glimpse into the life of people like you, who are like from the top 2% of Pakistanis. And what do you think that does? It makes people feel bad about their own situation. It makes people think, man, look how much they have, look how little I have. I earn 15,000 rupees a month and I have to take care of my entire family. When these people, when they go to a restaurant with their friends, their bill is 3,000-4,000 rupees. And I cannot, ever do that in my life. And the Prophet, peace be upon him, and the teachings that he gave us, like not looking at people who have more than you, being content with what you have, understanding that this life is a test, understanding that those who have more will be questioned more, and understanding that the person who goes through the most difficulties in this life, a moment in paradise they'll forget all the difficulties, right? These prophetic teachings about gratitude, about contentment, about divine decree, these ideas, they significantly impact human psychology. A friend of mine, one of the reasons he accepted Islam was he went through a lot of personal tragedies, horrific things. And understanding the Islamic paradigm, it gave him intellectual and emotional satisfaction, right? And that's the power of the prophetic teachings, that they have a huge impact on human psychology. So just to summarize this section about the impact of the life of the Prophet, peace be upon him, on world history, and all those different subjects that I just spoke about. The French historian Lamartine, this is what he said. If the grandeur of the aim, the smallness of the means, the immensity of the results are the 3 measures of a man's genius, who would dare humanly compare a great man of modern history with Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam? So the impact of the life of the Prophet is not something which even a non-Muslim can dismiss. The Prophet is the most influential human being that ever lived. And that's not just coming from a Muslim. Anybody who objectively looks at history and looks at the criteria of impact, they will recognize that this man, there is no competition in terms of influence. However, what we want to do today is we want to ask the question, not just was he influential Are his teachings useful? That's clear. It's clear that it is that he is influential. It's also very clear that his teachings are useful. Why? Because people have lived according to them and they've dealt with many problems according to them. However, now the question is, was he true? Now there's only 3 logical possibilities when you look at his life. And this is, at first pass, I have to admit, this is a bit of a strange way, it can seem like a bit of a strange way to show that he's speaking the truth. Because, we can use the miracle of the Quran, we can use the prophetic prophecies, we can use the various miracles of the Quran, like the linguistic miracle, preservation, and so on and so forth. This is a bit of a different way of proving that the Prophet, peace be upon him, is truthful, but it is a very simple way. And that's the way that we're actually going to do in today's session. So there's only 3 possibilities about him. Either someone would say he's not speaking the truth, or that he is deluded. He thinks he's speaking the truth, but he's not. In that case, he's not lying. He's just, according to them, he would be insane. And the third is that he's speaking the truth. We're going to do an elimination. We're going to show it's impossible that he was alive. It is impossible that he was deluded. So logically, there is no other conclusion than he was speaking the truth. He was speaking the truth. Okay, let's look at the psychology of lying. Now, the psychology of lying and the literature on this is actually quite rich. We would think, academics have way better things to do than to look into the psychology of lying, but no, there's niches and super niches and whatnot. So, lying is a type of mechanism, is a type of utility, right? It's something that we use. Now, Leonard Saxe, he gives a very interesting take on lying. Lying has long been a part of everyday life. We couldn't get through the day without being deceptive, right? So he's written a lot on lying and various other academics have done studies on this. So it's pretty clear human beings do lie. We do actually lie. Now, he believes, and this is, you may think, why on earth am I using an academic to establish a point that's pretty obvious? But still, it's important to, sort of get an academic, view on this as well. He says something which is quite obvious, right? He believes that anyone under enough pressure or given enough incentive will lie, right? Now that's something I want you to keep in mind. 2 conditions which are quite obvious, but he's sort of worked on this in an academic way and he's come up with this. Either a very powerful incentive, enough of an incentive, or enough of a pressure, right? So as an example, anyone familiar with Kantian ethics? Kantian ethics, Immanuel Kant. He had these types of universal categorical imperatives that, you can't lie, full stop, no matter what. And then obviously the contention is, what if somebody turns up at your house with a blood-soaked knife and they look crazy and they ask you, is your neighbor home? I want to kill them, right? Then obviously Kantian ethics gets into problem. So that's a pressure under which a lot of people will say, no, it's okay to lie. And then there's the whole idea of incentive, and incentive is the major reason why people lie. People lie because of incentive, because they're getting something out of it. Now, you'd be insane to lie for absolutely no reason and just go crazy, which we can cover that in the section on deluded. But you would lie for an incentive. There'd be something great, either saving university students getting home late. Not you guys are angels, mashallah. But university students getting home late, a little white lie, or there's traffic, there's an elephant that's come onto the road, these types of things. There's a reason why you would lie. Now let's look at the life of the Prophet, peace be upon him. Now I want to give you a bit of context. Not everybody understands this context properly. So I really want you to immerse yourself in this context. The Prophet, peace be upon him, in the 7th century, in Arabia, he was born in the manufacturing center of shirk. Okay? What is shirk? Shirk is the worship of other than God. Idol worship, calling upon jinn, calling upon demons, witchcraft. All of these things were part and parcel of the Meccan life. Okay? The Meccan society, their economics, their political order, all of this was dependent upon shirk. Now you may say, how on earth is the economic system of Makkah based upon shirk? Anyone can answer that question. Why was the economic system of Makkah based upon shirk? Fairly obvious question, but still worth asking. Why did the Meccan life depend upon shirk? Yes?
It was the center of all the things. Every people came here, so they buy, like all people all around the world will come to Makkah to worship.
Yes.
And they would buy the local things from the merchants, so
yes.
it was like business going on.
Excellent. People would come there with their idols, they would purchase other idols, and they would purchase Meccan goods. Other people will come and they would trade their goods and spices and these things, right? So you have to understand the importance of shirk. You have to understand the importance of polytheism within Meccan society. It was the binding force, the gel of Meccan society. Now within this system of shirk, within this pressure, this fabric of polytheism, the Prophet, peace be upon him, he came with a profound, simple message. And the message was, La ilaha illallah. There is nothing worthy of worship except God, except Allah. And this, you have to understand, is an incredibly controversial statement. We say La ilaha illallah like it's nothing, yeah? You have to understand, to say La ilaha illallah in Makkah was not a small thing. Was not a small thing. You are basically saying, I am challenging the fabric of your society. Now, I want you to realize something. He didn't just say La ilaha illallah. He called others to this message, which is tearing the very foundations of the Meccan society. I want you to consider something, right? I want you to consider something. Whether we like to admit it or we don't like to admit it, we are under immense sociological pressure at all times. And we conform. This is what human beings do. We conform to society. To 2020, right? Lums University. 1990, Lums University. If you take a picture of the way people dress and what they're doing, 1990 and 2020, is there a difference? There is a difference. You may look at their clothes and say, oh, those clothes, they look so silly. You know, people are wearing flares and, you know, big collars, and look how dumb they look. Yeah? I promise you, including myself, if I went to Lums in 1990, you'd eventually dress up like that. You wouldn't dress the way you dress now, because of sociological pressure. Sociological pressure is a huge, huge thing. Okay. Last year, this time, something interesting happened between India and Pakistan. What happened? Sorry?
There's skirmishes.
Skirmishes. Okay. Think back to that time. Didn't you find people that were not even patriotic before become very patriotic overnight? Everybody became a patriotic Pakistani. Yes? And across the border in India, people became very patriotic Indians. Right? So you had this sea of nationalism in both countries. Now imagine here, while everybody is really nationalistic, and you know, India just flew the planes across the border, all these things are happening on Twitter. Imagine at that point, somebody here in Lahore during a massive protest against India, imagine if somebody in the city of Lahore, literally surrounded by Pakistani flags, he lifts up the Indian flag. Do you think a sane person would do that? No. How much pressure would you have to overcome to raise up the Indian flag in Pakistan? Or vice versa, the Pakistan flag in India? How much? Some people would say, this guy's insane. Like, this guy is crazy. Okay. Action like that. Would you be safe? No. You'd probably end up as samosas. Yeah? You'd probably just disintegrated. Yeah? Yet the Prophet, peace be upon him, he raised the flag of monotheism in the land of polytheism on his own. On his own. Without fear. And when he did that, what did they do? Oh yeah, it's fine. No, they threatened him. Not only did they threaten him, they threatened his family. They boycotted him. They used all types of pressures. In fact, they said to him, because look, the Makkah leaders, the Quraysh, they're not stupid. They know why people lie. So they thought, okay, what does he want? Okay, so they said to him, we'll give you what you want. Whatever you want. You want money, power, status, women, medicine, whatever you want. Whatever you want, even if you want to be, I don't know, any request that you have, they were ready to fulfill it. Any request. Did he say, okay, I'll give up my message? Anyone know the seerah? Did he say, yeah, okay, I'll give it up? He refused. And when the attacks got stronger on him and his followers and his family, his message, it did not stop. Now the question we need to think is, why if there's no incentive, why if there's sociological pressure to conform, why if there's actually pressure to your life, there's risk to your life, and you're going to go through not only personal loss, but also financial loss and possibly lose your life, why would you stick to the message of La ilaha illallah on your own? Why would you do that? And the simplest explanation is that the Prophet was not looking for something material. He was not looking for something material. He believed in his message. And he stuck firm to his message regardless of the pressure. So wherever the Makkans asked him, he refused to give up the message. Now his message, I want you to understand something about this message. It wasn't just Allahu Akbar. Yeah? When we say Allahu Akbar, we think it means Allah is great. No. It was saying Allah is the greatest. So not only was it an insult to their idols, indirectly, who was it also insulting? When you ask the Quraysh, when you ask the pagans, why do you worship these idols? What did they say? What was their message? We found our forefathers doing it. What did he say? Oh yeah, your forefathers, they were great, yeah. No, he said your forefathers were also on the wrong path. And that really cheesed off the Makkans, the pagans. Because now, it's not just a matter of insulting their gods, but insulting their forefathers. And that is something for them which was unbearable. Now the Prophet, he broke another thing in Makkah. Not only did he break shirk and the idea that, okay, no one can challenge shirk, he also challenged the idea of nationalism or tribalism. Yeah? We are right because we are Banu Shams or Banu Abu Manaf or whatever. No, he challenged that. And that again is a massive sociological pressure which he overcame. Now, we like to think of ourselves as independent. Right? I'm independent, you're independent, we're all independent. But actually, a lot of our life is like this. We are dependent upon the thoughts of others. There are sociological experiments which I've done, there are psychological experiments which I've done that show human beings, they will deny their own perception, They will deny what they see with their own eyes to fit in line with society's expectations. Right? People are willing to deny what they have in front of their eyes to fit with society's expectations. Yet here we have a man who absolutely refuses to conform. Yeah? When I was at school, you know, there was this idea that everybody wanted to be independent and different. Oh, I'm different. But the funny thing is, when you looked at the school from a bird's eye point of view, everybody was actually part of a social group. Yeah? You had the nerds, you had the goths, I think in Pakistan you call them emos or whatever. Yeah? So everyone's like, I'm independent because I got this different tattoo, or I'm independent because I'm wearing these black. No, actually everybody's conforming to a particular group. Yeah? Someone was truly independent, they'd actually turn up to school in a Mexican poncho with a hat. Yeah? That would be like truly independent. But no one does that. Everyone fits within a group. Now if you look at the teachings of the Prophet, peace be upon him, again, those teachings, they were not teachings from the Quraysh. They were not teachings from the society. They were unique teachings. He said, love for others what you love for yourself. In any society which is poor, right? Selfish behavior, greedy behavior is a little bit more excusable than in societies where things are very much more better. That's just a simple rule of life. Yet here you have a man who's teaching in a society that's poor, people that are poor, he's teaching them, give to others, help others, right? Love for others as you love for yourself. And this is again something very unique. This is not the Qurayshi way of life. What's interesting about this is Russ Rogers. He is a US military analyst. He's written a book called The Generalship of Muhammad. And what he does in the book is he looks at the life of the Prophet as a general, but also a politician, a statesman. And he says something phenomenal in the book. He says that the Prophet, peace be upon him, he took his enemies out of their experience. He did things out of their experience. They expected him to act like a Qurayshi, but he didn't act like a Qurayshi. Yeah? And he also did something remarkable. The greatest, I think, political theorist who's had a huge impact on the 20th century, Saul Alinsky. Anyone heard of Saul Alinsky? Rules for Radicals, right? That's his book. So that's obviously something that Barack Obama and others have been influenced by, Hillary Clinton and others. So Saul Alinsky had these unique ideas about societal change, how to actually change society and use the minimum amount of resources to get your way, right? And his book, Rules for Radicals, was a landmark book which is still used till today in community activism. Now, Russ Rogers, he says, if Saul Alinsky looked at the Prophet, he would have recognized these are my principles which he discovered in the 20th century. Right? He was applying those same very principles. So the Prophet, peace be upon him, he broke conformity. He didn't act like a Qurayshi. Even the act of asking your enemies for total submission was not a Qurayshi way of doing things. Qurayshi way of doing things was, okay, fine, we've taken you over, we're going to take some camels from you or whatever, and let's have a negotiation or whatever, right? But he asked for total submission. They said, let's compromise, we worship Allah, but then a little bit of idol worship. He's like, no. And again, this was not the Qurayshi way of doing things. Something else which he did, which was again very un-Qurayshi, was when he dominated his enemies, like in Makkah, he had a general amnesty, which again is very, very non-Qurayshi. So he broke these types of conformities. Now, I spoke about in the beginning, what did I speak about? Science, his impact on science, his impact on sociology, his impact on geography, his impact on politics. I didn't mention military history, but you have military analysts today talking about the way that he thought and considering him a great general. How could a man in the desert with no formal training, he didn't go to Sandhurst, right? How could he develop these types of strategies? And again, it shows he didn't conform. He didn't fit the Qurayshi way of thinking. And also, I want you to consider something, right? Today in the world, we have racism, right? Today, even here in Pakistan, we have, okay, these people are lighter, these people are darker, we're not going to marry them, they're too dark, right? These people are Sindhis, they're Balochis. There's still some xenophobia and racism, right? Even though we're not supposed to have it as Muslims. Yet, in the 7th century, where it was the norm to be xenophobic and racist and tribal, the Prophet broke the fabric of the society and recombined it. And about this, Russ Rogers says something very interesting. His creation of a new super tribe, the Ummah, composed of people from every group in the Hijaz and even beyond, certainly went against every notion of tribal clan and family solidarity that is a hallmark of Arabian culture still prevalent today. So he was not a Qurayshi from a point of view of metaphysics or ontology. Like, he was doing things that just did not fit the Qurayshi way of doing things. Yet he was a Qurayshi, so where on earth did he get this knowledge? Where on earth did he learn to break conformity? I want you to understand something, yeah? If you lose your mobile phone in this room, the chances of you getting it back are a lot more than the chances of you losing your mobile phone here you losing your mobile phone in a very poor, dusty village somewhere. Because we're in an affluent city, affluent, students, someone lost their mobile, chances of getting back are very high. You happen to lose it in a dusty village somewhere outside of Sialkot, chances are you're not going to ever get it back, right? So love of wealth is there in a society, and a society that's poorer, you have more love of wealth, right? Because you have to understand, the way we function in the world today is we get a monthly wage. Yeah, you work, you get a wage. You work, you get a wage. You work, you get a wage. In the past, wages didn't come per month. You had income which was not monthly, but money that you either inherited or you did one business transaction in the year and then you have to run the whole year on it, and then until next time you make a thing. So wealth had a lot more attachment than sometimes in societies that are more affluent. Yet, in this society, where the Quraysh, they wanted to show off the wealth, again the Prophet broke that conformity, broke the way that the Quraysh did things. He taught the opposite. He didn't teach us bling bling and YOLO. He taught us wealth is not having many possessions, rather true wealth is richness of the soul. He was anti-materialistic. He was a simple person. And what's beautiful is, and Russ Rogers again in the book General Super Muhammad, he says this. He says that the Prophet, peace be upon him, he did not have access to wealth even though he was the general. Because the money that actually came was distributed, and the money that actually came to him, that money was actually used on the poor and for the ummah, right? So again, he taught people the opposite of materialism, the opposite of what the Quraysh were up to for centuries. Now there's one beautiful incident. There was a man that was wearing a gold ring. And the Prophet saw him, and he was a Muslim man, and the Prophet got angry because you're not allowed to wear gold as a man. So the Prophet took the ring and he threw it, and he walked away. Now the Sahaba, they saw this and they said to the man, just pick up your ring and sell it. Fine, you shouldn't wear it. But here is a man, I want you to understand something. In a society where gold has a lot of worth, he says, I will not pick up what the Prophet wrote. That's the societal change he managed to create, right? People that had a love of wealth, that he could take off someone's ring made of gold, throw it on the floor, and the person, even though it was halal, technically halal, for him to pick it up and sell it, he refused to because the Prophet dropped it. That's the impact he had, and his teachings again were non-Qurayshi, non-conformist. The economic constraints that he put upon the city of Makkah after he conquered it. What did he do? He smashed the idols. But the idols were the source of income. The idols were the reason why Arabian society regarded Makkah as holy and great. Why would somebody do that? If you're about to create a state, which he did, he created a state, the first thing you need is money. And the first thing he does is he smashes the idols. And the people started to worry, where on earth are we going to get money from now? He put in place certain economic restrictions which again were non-Qurayshi. He got rid of interest. He got rid of price fixing. He got rid of bribery. He got rid of many of these things. And again we have to ask the question, why would a man do things to his own detriment which were not prevalent in society when there's no incentive and there's pressure to conform? Because those things are actually valued. So the thesis that the Prophet, peace be upon him, was lying is a non-starter. Is a non-starter. It doesn't work. Right? Whichever way you slice the onion, you cannot say that. So let's look at the second possibility. The second possibility, well, maybe he wasn't lying, maybe he was just deluded, maybe he really genuinely believed he was a prophet, but he wasn't actually a prophet. He genuinely believed it. So he didn't lie, he just happened to have a grand delusion. Okay. So about this, I want to highlight one incident and then give a general principle. During the life of the Prophet ﷺ, his son passed away. And when his son passed away, there was an eclipse of the sun and the moon. There was an eclipse. And when the eclipse happened, even the non-Muslims were like, wow, his son passed away and the eclipse happened. Remember, Arabian society was very superstitious before the Prophet ﷺ. Very superstitious. So Arabian society was very superstitious before the Prophet. And what did he do? He didn't come out and say, look, I am the Prophet of God because my son passed away and even the sun and the moon, they are mourning, which is what the people were saying. The sun and the moon are sad because of the death of the Prophet's son. He didn't say that. He said the sun and the moon, they do not eclipse for this. And he said, when you see this, you should worship God. Again, and you see this throughout the life of the Prophet, he's always linking things back to Allah, back to Allah, back to Allah. It's never about him. He is an abd, he is a slave, and he's happy being a slave. He's not directing people to anything except Allah. Now, actually I forgot to mention one thing. I mentioned in the last slide about the delusional impossibility, which is that I gave the example of the solar eclipse. By the general principle, here in Lum's University, if the head of Lum's University gave you a project to do, a project in which, I don't know, you had £1 million, right, $1 million, whatever, and you happen to be completely deluded, and they came back to you after a year in which you're supposed to run a project which may be, I don't know, a bakery for orphans. You being a deluded person, you couldn't run that bakery. You couldn't pay the staff on time. You couldn't order the dough. You couldn't get all those ingredients and those mixtures and those machines. You'd screw it up. And they were talking about a bakery. Yet the Prophet ﷺ, he ran a large empire. He was a statesman. He was a father. He was a wrestler. He was, so many different roles. So to claim a person cannot run a factory, cannot run a bakery while they're insane, then how on earth could he run an entire state? Now, I wanted to give a good example of a dichotomy, right? So, Adolf Hitler, someone who changed Europe in a bad way by launching a massive war, creating a massive army that ravaged through Europe, and they killed millions, right? killed Jews, killed Russians, killed French. You have to remember how strong Hitler was. Now, even in his strength, he was making deluded decisions, which his generals write about. They say, for example, he invaded Russia when he didn't need to. He had a treaty with Russia. He could have conquered Western Europe, then went back to Russia. But he decided to just attack on both fronts. In fact, there's a very interesting theory that some of the allies, they wanted to assassinate Hitler, but they decided, he isolated himself. He went into a bunker. The last 105 days of Adolf Hitler was inside a bunker. And when Germany needed him the most, he committed suicide. That's what he did. I want to show the difference between that coward and the Prophet, peace be upon him. At the Battle of Hunayn, the Sahaba, they were going through a valley. And when they were going through a valley, they were attacked from all sides with arrows and everybody ran back. Everybody ran back. I want you to understand something. You know, today's warfare is pretty easy compared to the warfare of the past. Why? You just get shot and you die. In the past, if you get an arrow that pierces you, there's no medical aid, and you'll have agonizing pain for days and then you'll die. Wars back then were way more difficult. So as arrows are coming down and enemies are attacking, the Sahaba and the Prophet, they're all together there with the recently converted Makkans, and the large army that the Sahaba was so impressed by. Yeah? The Muslims were impressed by, which Allah mentions in the Quran. That large army, they ran away. This is the Battle of Hunayn. This is a true incident. They ran away. Now, what did the Prophet ﷺ do? He stood his ground. He stood his ground, right? He didn't move. He said, "Where are you men going? Come to me. I am Allah's messenger. I am Muhammad. I am son of Abdullah." He managed to rally the army together and they did a counterattack and defeated the army. That's the difference between the brave Prophet ﷺ and the cowardly behavior of Hitler. And that clearly shows his belief is something he was sincere in. Because you can't fake it. There's certain times in your life you can't fake it. You can pretend to be nice, but when you've had, like in LUMS when you have exams and you have 3-4 days where you haven't slept and you've been living off coffee, you snap at your friends, right? Your true you comes out. You say things that you wouldn't normally say. When people are on their deathbed, they can't pretend to be a different person. Hitler showed his true colors by hiding in a bunker and killing himself. The Prophet ﷺ showed his true colors by standing on his ground when the arrows were coming down and rallying the army. Right? And what this shows is that he was sincere in his message, and his message was ultimately successful. His message was ultimately successful. You have people today, alive today, who have never met the Prophet. They have never met the Prophet, yet they are willing to spend their life in according to his teachings. They're willing to study his life in a way that they want to try and follow him as much as possible. They find great comfort in his teachings. Now, one of the things which non-Muslims wonder a lot is, why do you love the Prophet? Why do you love the Prophet, peace be upon him? What's so great about him? Now, there's many ways you can answer this, but one of the most beautiful answers I heard from Abdurrahim Green was this: we love Muhammad, peace be upon him, because he taught us to connect with Allah. Very small, simple answer, but very profound answer. Because he is the gateway for us to connect with Allah. And that is not only useful instrumentally, but also it is true. He was indeed the truthful one. He was somebody that it is impossible that he was a liar. It's impossible that he was deluded. The only logical conclusion is that he was speaking the truth. In fact, when we look at his life, we can argue he is the truthful one because he has so many prophecies. And we have, a separate publication on this called The Forbidden Prophecies. We can look at his character, we can look at the linguistic miracle of the Quran or the other miracles of the Quran, his teachings. There's so many different ways that we can say he is the truthful one. But the way which I want to end upon is, he is the truthful one because his life is a testimony to the fact that he could not have been a liar. He could not have been deluded. So the only logical possibility is that he was speaking the truth. Everything good I've said is from Allah. Every mistake is from myself. Jazakallah khair. Okay. Q&A. So I think we're going to give about 20 minutes for Q&A. I think some people have some questions written down, and other people can ask questions. So you can raise your hands if you have any thoughts, comments, or suggestions. Sorry you came in very late. I just finished it.